Well, very happy to be here with you this afternoon. So thank you a lot for inviting me, Sandra, Luciana. It's a big pleasure to be here. Actually, I have been teaching in Barcelona in a lot of schools, but it's my first time in BAU. So I feel extremely excited to be here and to finally meet this learning community. Well, don't know if you know anything about me, but long story short, I have been working in the field of interaction design, user experience design, service design, design thinking, design management for the last, well, let's not make the numbers, but for a long time. I have been working with these folks here in HP. I have been having several roles, and with them actually we have been building one of the strongest design practice in HP, and I tend to say in the Barcelona corporate environment. So we have been doing a very good job. And now, more recently, I am actually working in the design research team in Roche Diagnostics. I am leading the team of design researchers. We are doing research, service design, early concept prototyping, kind of working in the healthcare domain. Welcome on board. Okay, so we are here today to talk about service design, yes, a little bit. And the idea is to really, I will not give you like a talk in the sense of, no, I will give you my truth. I would like to provoke you with some reflection, using data and research as a starting point to trigger a reflection in yourself. A reflection that I believe is really needed and actual nowadays. The full thing is, how do we move from design thinking, which is about theory, framework, abstraction, into design responsible actions. Design at this point in time maybe need less thinking and more action. Okay, that's my humble perspective. So those actions, in my opinion, should go towards a responsible standpoint to what we are doing as designer and our intervention, our impact in the world. Okay, so how this is going to look like, I will try to be brief, I promise. I will do my best, okay? 15 minutes, 20 minutes maximum. When I see that you are start being like bored, raise your hand. I will try to close my talk. But the idea is to give you provocation, food for thought, okay? I would like you to come here as thinking beings, okay? Make questions, think yourself. We will take advantage of Luciana, that will be like, will open a conversation with me and with you based on some of your questions. So I will try to answer as much as possible. And then we will have like an action workshop. I will not tell more. It's called Design in the Margins, but the idea is that we can experiment and act together on what does it mean taking this different perspective on design. Hopefully, if we are good and let's say on track, there will be time for a wrap up, and maybe we can draw together some conclusion. So that's a conversation, okay? It's a dialogue. I'm expecting you to participate. I will try to give you some input, those who trigger some thoughts, okay? And if you disagree, beautiful, let's disagree together. That's actually how we can build a common, responsible service design practice. I will use the word practice several times. Design, it's about practicing. It's about making things happen. Okay, first reflection. As designer, maybe you are still studying, but people that is actually working already in the industry, but even yourself, we are facing an increasing level of complexity. Actually, the design object is becoming extremely large and extremely layered, variegate. And there is like, to me, a proof point of this to happen. Usually the tools evolve as the challenge evolves. A few years ago, the journey mapping was I would say, the main tool for service design or for design thinking. It has been, and it still is, a mainstream tool. But I can tell you that when you are working in the industry, is limiting somehow, because a journey mapping is not able to convey all the complexity of the system that we are designing. So more and more, we are observing the shift in terms of tools from journey mapping into ecosystem mapping. Ecosystem mapping are not something new, but now, at this point in time, are becoming predominant to be able to explain a complexity that is not linear, but it is multi-layered. So tools are never neutral, and tools are helping us to convey a message, to understand what we have to do as designers. So here, a couple of observations. Again, tools are evolving, the complexity is increasing. What we can do with this complexity? So here I would like to quote Ezio Manzini, that in a recent conference said, at the end, we need to have a very humble standpoint. Ezio Manzini is one of the founding fathers of the service design discipline, okay? For the people that maybe, it's now an old guy, but in his days has been really building the foundation for this practice. And he said, we should switch from the design of a user interface, an object, a chair, a service, an app, of designing for, where our standpoint is to enable a possible experience, to put in place the variables for something to happen that is actually out of our control. So this means that as designer, we need to recognize that we cannot control everything. Actually, when you are designing for this complex ecosystem, you cannot by any means design everything. It's just impossible. What you can do is understand which are the key areas where surgically and smartly you can intervene to create an impact in the customer experience, in the user experience, hopefully for good. I would like to use Bruno Latour's words. We could be disturbing realities in this ecosystem, no? Understanding which are the areas to unlock to enable a better user experience. Okay? So the thing is, this complexity reached like an unprecedented point in the last 3 years. The digital acceleration that we have been experiencing in the last 3 years, so during the COVID, would have been taking 15 years to have the current adoption. 15 years in 3. So, of course, when these type of accelerations are happening, they have an impact, no? One way or another. So I will use now several examples from my current job that is about healthcare. I work in diagnostics, so I try to help professionals that are actually working in the care. Although I will mix with some examples coming from my previous life in HP. But let's understand what this jump meant in terms of well-being, no? And if we look at how digital acceleration has been affecting well-being, and we still keep the metaphor of the case study of healthcare, it had an impact on the patients, for good most likely, no? On the whole care community, and on the medical personnel. If we look at the care community and the medical personnel, I would like you to bring you this data point. No? Digital acceleration or digitalization comes with a big promise of fixing everything. No? Everything can be remote. Everything can be done anytime, anywhere, continuously. Effortless? Question mark. 2 months ago, I was in C-Lab. C-Lab is an innovation center in Lausanne. Lausanne is the oldest nursing school in the world. And that's an experimentation center where they are training the nurses, experimenting with innovation, sensor, artificial intelligence. They have 7 experimental environments, 7 simulation environments. I was interviewing the director of this center because we want to work together. And I asked her, well, tell me, thinking at the future, which is the biggest challenge that you have today in your work? And her answer was, well, our biggest problem is that a nurse stays in her job, in his job, between 5 and 8.5 years. Then they quit. But they quit doesn't mean that they work in another hospital. They change job because they are completely burned out. And this burnout is because of the workload, because of the emotional load, because of the cognitive load, because of the amount of information and the processes that are not designed actually for them. She told me, of course, now you bring here a lot of new solutions, no? But all these solutions are just making things worse and worse because there are more processes that these people have to connect. First observation. The second one. The promise of digital transformation. Let's change the environment and let's think at our everyday life. PEGA research report has been running a study in 2018. about actually demystifying the desktop, now about the habits and behavior of the workforce in big companies, work professionals. And they extracted this very interesting data point. In a normal workday, a user, a professional like me, is doing 134 copy and paste and is using up to 30 applications before COVID. Maybe the same number today will be potentially worse. What does it mean this for us? Our digital environment is still extremely fragmented. We have sources of information everywhere, and maybe nowhere, and there is a lot of manual effort that we, as user, as human, had to make to move information from one place to the other, from one document to the other, from one folder to the other, from one sheet to the other, no? With systems that do not speak to each other. All this work is manual. And also this work, and so establishing all this connection between content, connection that are needed in order for us to process this information, is error-prone and a very frictionless, let's say, a process with a lot of friction, so requiring a lot of effort. The promise of digital transformation, third data point. A lab manager is a guy that in a lab environment, a lab environment is the place where we are running tests. Okay, if you go to the doctor and prescribe you blood analysis, the blood samples go somewhere, no? And this is this somewhere. So they have like a building with a lot of machineries where all these blood samples are dispatched, analyzed, and so forth. To do all type of analysis, DNA, tissue, blood analysis, everything. Now, those guys in this environment, of course, have different type of machineries coming from different manufacturers. And this guy is the one in charge of deciding about the new machine that can be bought, no? Actually, it plays an important role in the end-to-end customer journey. Well, they receive up to 40 emails per month per vendor. Okay? So information that they do never, ever process, that got completely lost in the space, creating this feeling of being completely overwhelmed. So if we combine these three elements, do you understand how and when the concept of digital fatigue that is recent, how it looks like, and how we can all experience it? And at the end, at the core of this concept, there is a very simple fact. Our brain, our cognitive system has limited capabilities. Our processing memory is limited. So if the amount of information that we process is more than the one that we can actually digest, it becomes noise, it becomes error, it becomes fatigue, okay? It makes us make mistakes, by the way, and can have a lot of consequences on our well-being. Why burnout is becoming one of the hottest topics in contemporary work environment. Before, having a burnout was something that was very unique, no? Now, most of your population is under a burnout. It's not by chance, okay? Another observation. No? You might, my HP friends might remember this. If we look at all this digital acceleration, there are also other variables that for me are interesting to consider. And that's a study that we have done with the HP team when the COVID just started, okay? So we have been interviewing different creative and professionals around the world, trying to understand where was the sweet spot between digital acceleration and actually the use of analog technologies, no? Paper. And quite surprisingly, despite digital seems to be at that point in time like, I don't know, the superpowers, no? Everything was possible. People was reporting that for doing deep and focused work, paper was still extremely important. But the content that was on paper was lost because the connection between analog and digital is extremely consuming, is extremely complex, is not resolved. The so-called physical to digital transition is not smooth. Actually, it's, again, a manual process. Last challenge, last observation. The This is a neonatal intensive care unit, okay? It's a space that for me it's very important because in 2 lives ago, I was spending there like 4 years of my time. So studying actually how medical personnel, families, the newborns were interacting in this complex environment. These are environments in which you have several workflows interplaying, several services interplaying, the notion of care, the notion of diagnosis. There are many things that are actually now kind of intertwined in order to be able to produce the resulting care for these newborns. The point is, this environment that is characterized by this pervasive and intelligent interaction is not anymore an exception. Most of our environment present today this level of systemic complexity. Okay? Coming back to the previous point, we need to think at how we design services for complex systems. Okay, that's fundamental. Now, again, in this type of environment, and again, interviewing, I'm reporting you real life, okay? Because I only know what I know. I cannot tell you any other story. I was in Brussels, it was again in March, and in Brussels there is the Saint-Luc Hospital, which has like, it's a whole building of laboratory. Each floor specialized in a specific type of analytics. And of course, it's plenty of machinery, very sophisticated machinery. Now, the main concern of the lab director was about how to promote a sense of environmental well-being in that environment, while the interaction with the devices, the interaction within, no, and in the workflows, the interaction with the services was actually, let's say, enabling, making emerging a sense of well-being that was affecting also qualities such as air, light, temperature, the so-called aesthetics or even soft qualities of interactions. Now, where do I want to go? Of course, all those observation data points are becoming like, how can I say, exponentially elevated in the realm of what I was calling time ago like the artificial revolutions. I don't want to cover today artificial intelligence. I believe that everyone has been talking too much about the ChatGPT and so forth, so let's not go there. But artificial intelligence did exist since years. Is anything new? Okay? So I don't want now to enter into reflection about, no, is good, is bad. Let's shift perspective and let's think at, as designer, how can we think of this artificial revolution in terms of opportunity? And what we can do to design, to enable a sense of well-being in this opportunity, given that the well-being for me is at the core of a human and planet-centric mindset, okay? I haven't said that, but without this notion of well-being, planet-centric design, human-centric design cannot exist. It's crucial. So, the promise of digital transformation, the question for you, how might we design technology that contribute to a greater sense of well-being, being connected, but not overwhelmed? The power of analog. How might we boost the value of physical-digital transition to amplify human capabilities, to be able to do more, be more creative, more artistic, more productive, more present? As simple as this. Being present today is the biggest challenge for everyone. We are always elsewhere. Pervasive intelligent interaction. How might we enable a smooth interplay of high complex services to make interaction meaningful and fluid? I do not have the answer, but I would like to share with you some of the attributes, qualities, or guidelines that I'm using in my work. I'm calling them well-being driven qualities for smart services intervention. Well-being driven qualities is clear, no? Are qualities of the experience, of the interaction of the service driven by well-being. For smart intervention, because in this complexity, we need to understand where and how to intervene, smartly and surgically. 3 proposals for you. The first one, Be connected, not distracted. And here I would like to bring this example from Google Jaguar, which is an explorational wearable device. Actually, this is a Levi's jacket with embedded sensor that will allow you to be focused on what you are doing while having a very lightweight, not intrusive interaction with, for example, a phone call. In this case, we see someone driving a motorbike that can actually, with gesture, interact and activate some action. It's a way to provide you all the power of connection, but being in the flow of what you are doing. Second direction, contextually flowing. Ambient computing was described by Mark Weiser in 1991. If you don't know who is Mark Weiser, please go and read his paper, The Computer of the 21st Century. Okay, it's a seminal paper. He was predicting in the early 90s the reality that we are living today. So this concept is not new, but now the technology is mature to make those interactions contextually aware, blended, physical and digital, fluid. So what if we can use the current surfaces to display information? What if we can give a sense of awareness of what we are understanding without bringing all the friction of today's current interactions? Socially intelligent. Again, an example from Google Soli. That's another exploration. They are working on a system of sensor and radar that are able to disambiguate complex human gestures and behaviors. Because artificial intelligence is not only about typing something on ChatGPT and getting content. It's about developing a level of understanding that is actually giving us time to focus on what is important for us. So for example, I'm always making this example. If I'm entering a room with my hand full with a tray, and I'm close to a door, what would you do? Open the door, without me saying one word, or pressing any button. So what if this interactive system would develop this type of social intelligence that can actually minimize or remove all the friction in the interactions? These are, for me, three directions that can drive maybe the future of design for well-being, because they will really help us to think of how, by designing these experiences in this way, maybe we can enable some sort of behavioral change. And here comes the last input for you, because of course that's very maybe insightful, maybe to some extent it can be an inspiration, maybe I gave you something that was already very known for you, or maybe a different perspective, I don't know. But the question for a designer is, where do we start? Well, there is this book from Alessandro Pollini, it's called Design in the Margins, and is using the idea of the margin as a playground for design research to develop a new notion of care. My proposal for this community, for us today, and the proposal that I'm taking, is looking at the margins as a playground for design, as an innovation accelerator for behavioral change. In the history of art, in the history of we always have been having big innovations that were coming from the margin. So why don't we go there to make an impact? Margins are economical margin, age margins, health margin, race margin, geographical margin, belief margins. There are many types of margin, maybe now more than ever. And everyone, one way or another, lives in the margins. So my proposal and provocation for you is, let's start designing in the margins. Let's try to take action by thinking at the margins. And maybe having in mind those quality, social intelligence, be connected, not distracted, fluent interaction, as a starting point to start thinking at how, by design, we can enable a different sense of well-being. Now, this should have been much more. Where do you stand? Okay, sorry. I see, my bad. Where do you stand? What's your standpoint? What's your position? And for answering this question, let's invite to the stage Luciana. And for the moment, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Alessia. Is this working? Yes. Thank you, Alessia, for the inspiration and all the concepts. We have some questions, mainly questions of the students of the Master in Service Design about all these topics. And one that is something that they want to know is, what do you think that we are doing wrong? What do we have to think about? What do we have to correct? You made a proposal to where we can start from, but how we can pay attention to that, change the way we work?
What do you think what we are doing wrong? As a student, as a designer, in your experience?
Well, I was actually reading a paper the other day. It was about like what went wrong with the service design, and it was. I wish I was less nervous. But I think like focusing maybe on the not enabling only the people to solve the issue, but like what it said was that we have been convinced that basically anyone that applies the methodology can arrive to the solution of the problem. And maybe sometimes it's like it talked about fake solutions, let's put it like that, because people were convinced that if you apply the design thinking and the double diamond, you will get to a solution, and it's probably not the only way, or maybe not the way always. So it was a little bit there. So
very well spotted. I think that as designers, let's for a moment not talk about service design per se, but because this applies to the whole design discipline, okay? I believe that design is an holistic discipline, so I think that we can move from service to CX, UX, but UI. Now let's look at design as a whole. One, I'm not sure if it's a mistake or, but design became a little bit of a commodity in a way. So given that the adoption barrier to talk about design is not that high, you can have everyone that take a 2 hours design thinking course, and they out of the sudden become designers. So just 2 months ago, can we have a training on service design? Because we would like to do on our own, no? We don't design it anymore. So in promoting the discipline, we have been transforming design into something that is maybe everyone can approach it. And you are right. I think it's nice that everyone has this type of sensibility, but then there are specific skills that everyone has, no? And also specific sensibility. So I'm not sure if this has been a mistake. I think it has been a consequence of the great success. Because as soon as the marketing people understood the power of design tools, they started implementing them. Customer journey that used to be, and it is, a design tool is reported in the marketing manual today. Data point, okay? So I think it's a sign of success. The point is, we should be able to still add value. And for me, a way of adding value is also calibrate the problem that we can solve. Something that I have been observing several times as a mistake is that the designer arrives and says, don't worry, no? I'm here now, I will fix everything. Now, this attitude, on top of being a little bit maybe annoying for someone, but it's just unrealistic, just because of the high complexity. So I believe that more and more as designer, we need to kind of reshape the area in which we can realistically intervene and be very sharp and intentional on what we do and what we don't do. I have seen so much design work, especially in service design, ending up in framework that became obsolete the week after in the industry, okay, when you are really implementing something. So for me, it's this capability of understanding what needs to be done and doing it, act on it, more than what I was saying in the beginning, from thinking to acting, okay? The only way for us to make design relevant is to count on design, the power of imagination, making concept tangible. That's something that is unique. The thinking part, is more open. I'm not sure if I made the point, but I hope I gave you at least a couple of points for reflection. I need to go faster.
I like very much that point, because at the end, design in action can connect many, many things that were not connected at the beginning or were not obviously connected. How do you think, from your experience, what can you tell us about the impact of design inside an organization? For example, in your job, now that the company introduced design as part of its core practices, which is the impact that this is having in the whole organization?
I'd say you can look at the introduction of design in a big organization in different phases. No? There is the first phase in which you make things safe. Okay, people don't get like, no? Especially if you're building big machineries, no, nothing happens. Then you make things looks nice, no, and pleasant, and then you make things really meaningful. Okay, so and in making things really meaningful, you can start intervening on the innovation agenda. Design role, in many times in a big organization, is not actually deciding what needs to be done. It's executing on someone else's decision. So the more we are able to develop tools that can influence decision making, the higher the impact. But just to make it very simple, I will share an example for last week. In my organization, when I came to Roche, there was a lot of talking about journey mapping. We had a lot of PowerPoint presentation explaining how to build a journey mapping framework, but really a lot, with slides, and at least 2 or 3 different agencies that were producing a different view on the same framework. I will not quote them, but believe me. An amount of information, a lot of framework, and not even one journey. So, I mean, I was asking, okay, but nice, but where are the pain points, no? Where do people, what we need to do, no? Where we need to start? So, last week I was in Rome for a marketing summit for the Roche Diagnostic team, so a lot of people from all over the world. And we build a journey, my team built a journey on the pre-purchase journey of a lab manager, the guys that I was presenting before, the one that received like 40 emails per vendor per month, that is not reading, is completely overwhelmed. So what we did, we said, okay, we had all the data points, but how we do bring this to life so that all these marketers do really understand the pain of this guy today and build a level of empathy with them. So instead of making the same, the poster, with the journey mapping, all these type of things, that at the end is still a complex artifact to disambiguate to some extent. It takes time to reach the audience. We made the video to tell the story using a specific metaphor that was a metaphor that was explaining the experience of the customer. And then we said, but look, we see how many videos, the video is not enough. What if we make an immersive video? So imagine a room big like this, as big as this, 3 walls and a video mapping. We have been working with a company that does it at the Ideal, okay? For Gaudi, for Van Gogh, that type of thing. So we were able to realize this installation so that people can immerse themselves in the pain point, because we want them to sort of touch and feel them. We had the budget for it, okay? That's not something that you can do every day, let's be clear. But we did it, and that, to me, it's an example of the impact of design, because out of that presentation, all the different countries, the marketing, the different countries wanted to have that video to show to all their teams, to kind of propagate that experience, because they wanted people to understand. So it's no more framework, but just, again, action with something concrete in which the simplicity of the message is important. I'm an advocate for simplicity. In order for design to have an impact in the organization, the message needs to be simple. Sometimes journey, blueprint are very complex objects that are not meant for generating a direct impact. And this is, I know it's controversial, but let me be controversial.
Well, because at the end, what you're explaining shows that design action needs many channels of communication at different levels.
Absolutely.
So you need to convince your internal audience, your external audience to be able and capable to run inside the organization many actions. And on the other side, you need to execute a service that maybe needs a technical device like a blueprint or a communication system that goes in another channel.
Very well said.
Yeah.
I'm aligned.
'Great. And, 'great. 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 One question that we are having and discussing is, we are talking about sustainability in many, many, many fields, almost in all areas of life and action, but sometimes not, especially in service design. So how we can incorporate this? You gave us some hints about incorporating sustainability for well-being in a way, or making it sustainable for people, but in a larger scale, how service design can be sustainable?
I think that service design in combination with interaction design or user experience design may play a big role. Okay, and I think that it's a role that has not been completely developed. We look at sustainability in the companies pretty much in terms of manufacturing and packaging and materials, okay? But there is another sense of sustainability that is about actually changing behaviors, because the only way to get through sustainable solution is, of course, let's say having like the zero carbon footprint, using less energetic demanding materials, less energetic demanding processes, and so forth and so forth. But at the core of building a sustainable future for us is behavioral change, changing our behavior as human. So the service that we design and the interaction and experiences that actually give shape, no, and transform these services into something that we can experience for real, have a big role to drive behavioral change. So I feel that, and when I say behavioral change, is what we do, no? The decision that we take every day, taking the bike or taking the car, to make it very, very simple. So how can we design services that start embedding this behavioral component that can actually produce a positive impact for good? No? When it's, let's say something very controversial. Now, when it's better to display or when it's better to print, it's not like black and white. So there are many decisions that we are taking and behaviors that we are doing in which we could make the difference. And I believe that that's something that service design as a discipline might really drive, and maybe is not happening yet that much, in my humble opinion. Very, very humble opinion.
I read last week, and maybe I'm not super precise on the number, but 90% of the apps that are designed and offered to the market have a, let's say, a life of 3 days. And after that are never used again.
This brings to another topic. Now, we always talk about sustainability, about, let's say, carbon footprint, but there is these big things about e-waste, which is huge. And no one really talks about that, because it's the part of sustainability that no one wants to touch, because it's where the revenue is coming, no? At the end, we are living in the attention economy. So that's what it is. So there is an ecosystem and a business that is built around it. And it's much more difficult to kind of unlearn behaviors that now are embedded in our practice. Stop scrolling for one day. This can have a big impact on sustainability. It's true.
This is something that we've been discussing a lot in the project. So what is needed really for as points for interaction with the users, but with the people that is going to be delivering that services? And I just want to go a little bit, last two questions. One, to go a little bit deeper on who is a service designer, because you mentioned that earlier, but can you build a bit more on that point?
In the industry, if this is something that maybe concerns you, I think that in the job roles today, if you're looking for a job, it's a mess, honestly speaking. Because, I mean, you have a UX designer that you don't know if you are, in most of the cases, pay attention, when they look for a UX designer, they are looking actually for a UI designer, okay? First tip. Then CX lead, what it is, depending on the company, this role can change massively, okay? Service designer. So my advice is that sometimes don't only look at the job label, but read the job description, okay? Because sometimes the job label in a big company are coming from HR, okay, that is giving you some labels and you need to use them, or maybe from other reasoning. Now, a service designer, in my opinion, at least in my experience, is first of all a designer with huge facilitating skills. Because when you are designing and orchestrating the services, you are intervening at that level of complexity. So it's someone that is able to embrace complexity, digest complexity, transform complexity in possible path of actions. This requires facilitating stakeholders, facilitating process, and facilitating teams. Okay? It's a great storyteller. You need to be able to convey the message in a simple way, because the service designer, he can play two roles. Usually, he's playing with the key business stakeholder. The service designer works very close to the business, because at that level, the service is defined. And then maybe the service orchestrated in different touch points is translated into experiences. Not always the service designer is the one designing also the experiences, but let's say has some level of connection. What else? It's a facilitator, it's a storyteller, it's a designer, let me say, now I'm trying to find the right word. It's someone that is really action-driven. The worst that can happen to service design project is to become completely abstract and lost in the space. And this happens so many times, because sometimes as designers, when we are not designing a user interface or a piece of hardware, we stay at the level that for the rest of the organization is very difficult to digest. So we put a lot of work that goes literally nowhere. So our capability of translating our design intuition, design intention, and our imagination into something that becomes actionable for the organization, that's critical. That's something that I cannot tell you how to do, okay? It's a little bit of an art, and you learn it by doing, unfortunately, okay? But being always actionable in whatever we are doing, it's super important. Is the so what, okay? Okay, you explain me all this, but then what should I do with all this information? And make proposal, because the worst that can happen is that they are wrong, and people will learn. So there is nothing wrong in being wrong, actually. There is a lot of potential value.
It's at the end someone that is matching opportunities, capabilities, possibilities, and speaking everyone's language in a way, right?
Said very well, I mean.
you need to speak everyone's language to make everyone convene in something that is possible also.
And to this point, the service designer is, in most of the cases, like, this guy used an expression, he's a kind of a translator of plain English in a way, no? Because in an urban organization, everyone is speaking a different language, and your role will be the one of becoming like a mediator, bringing everyone into a place where decision can be taken. So this role of mediation, translation, and create this plain language that becomes approachable for everyone is key. It requires a lot of therapy, by the way.
And all these capabilities of being a designer, how change your relation with the world? How do you see the world, or how this impacts your daily life, all these capabilities that you have as a designer?
Well, that's a very personal question, because you have nowadays a lot of different types and different profiles of designers. No, I don't know if we are able to say, I was coming before from a conversation about the role of behavioral personas, no? So, and depending on the behaviors, we can actually understand which are the dimension of a designer. Answering for myself, I think that I would like to quote someone that is actually a professor used to be a professor of Eindhoven University, Polytechnic, Kiso Verbeke. And he was saying that the role of design is to make possible the impossible. Okay? We have something that is unique, that is the power of our imagination. And we have something that is even more unique, that is we do not only think or imagine things, but we translate them into something that people can understand. And this is a superpower. This is a real superpower. So, And this superpower, it can be so strong that in a moment in which everything is changed, this artificial revolution, can actually open up scenarios of what the future may look like. So making possible what we thought or what we think could be impossible. So this is how I look at the world, in terms of possibilities and opportunities. I being positive and optimistic because I really believe in us as human beings, and I believe on the power that we can have in maybe not shaping, but enabling the right reflection for this to happen. I might be a little bit naive, but I prefer to be naive, but keep this sense of, positivity. And again, make possible the impossible. I would like to give this sentence to you as a gift, because it has been a gift for me, and has been always what drives me. When I had a lot of challenges, everyone was saying no, withdrawal, many times. No, not possible. Okay, come on, not possible, Make possible the impossible. And it can be like a small challenge or a big challenge. Never mind, you will leave your trace in this world one way or another. Everything counts. Every step counts. Every workflow counts. Every touch point counts.
I think it's a beautiful insight to move into action. What do you think? We can
Absolutely.
Start putting this into practice.
Yes. So, I don't know what time is it, because we've been talking a lot. Are we very late, or?
It's okay.
Not
It's
that
okay.
much, no.
So that you can explain that.
Okay, cool.
First, thanks Alessia for all the talk and the insights.
No, I mean,
Yes,
thanks
thank
to
you very much.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thanks for coming, really.
Thanks, Luciana, for inviting. All this is thanks to Luciana, to Sandra, Pablo. So thanks to the BAU for inviting us and to allow this space for reflection. I think it's very important. I was saying at the very beginning, design, it's a practice, it's not a theory. Okay, so let's practice together. And may I?
Yes.
Sorry.
Can I have one question?
Please.
Please, Sandra.
If we can design behavioral change, how should we educate the students so that they are ethic on their on this superpower that can be a positive superpower or not so positive superpower? No? But me as a coordinator of a master, it's something that worries me. Like, of course, they are super nice people, but you're giving them tools, and how can we address that?
Very good point. So behavioral design exists as a discipline as such, that is grounded on behavioral psychology. Okay, now I will not get into more detail because we don't have the time, but it does exist. And the thing is, the way in which our brain and cognitive system works, it's very predictable. Okay, this means that we can design experiences that can produce a behavior or another. When I was mentioning before the attention economy, that is our social media, it's based around it, that are like addictive behaviors that maybe started as something fun, but now they have an economical counterpart. As simple as this, there is economy behind. Now, I am a fan of this group that is called Irrational Labs, and they are really studying and developing the idea of behavioral design, but for good. Okay, and now we can use behavioral design not meant as dark partners, but actually to produce a positive behavioral change. And of course, there are different types of studies, experiences, but I believe that being able to behavioral design has been for so much time into the realm of big corporate environment to produce an economical benefit. Okay, now maybe it's time to change it. And I think that from school, you can educate the students to use behavioral design in a different way. Of course, it's not as simple as that, because there are always, But for example, when you are able to demonstrate that there are different types of patterns that maybe can produce a similar outcome, but in a better way, this is something that can open up the conversation for looking at our digital experiences in a different way. So it's a very good question, and I believe, personally, I think that it should become part of the school's responsibility to bring this topic, because it has a massive impact at this point in time.
Thank you.
I'm not a super expert, that's why I will not say more than this.
But I think just opening and making you think, because sometimes you can design without being aware of the impact it will have. So at least being aware of how your actions can change.
In the old school, sorry guys, I'm opening a boring parenthesis, okay? So tools, so a tool, it's a design object, okay? It's an artifact. It means that it's done for something. Tools are never neutral, never. They always have an intent. They always have a goal, so to say. So, and the whole concept of usability, to make it very, very simple, is grounded on the idea that we can design objects and experiences that we perceive as easier to use, or that can make us feel smarter or intelligent, no? Make us smart. So at the end, what we design has always a consequence, and this consequence can be that it takes less time to complete, I don't know, the procedure for buying something, no? So that we can buy in one click or even without even realizing that we're buying something, super dangerous with kids and with children. Or we can actually bring it to the extreme in which what we design can actually promote other type of behavior. And this is an ethical point that should be in everyone's agenda. It's proven the role of social media on the kids in terms of mental health. We are living a season in which mental health for kids is becoming a major problem, not minor one anymore. So we need to take responsibility. There is no other option, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
No other option.
Yeah, I know. Thank you very much.